Hello, my name is LoG, and welcome to part 2 of this small arpeggio power-up. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below for my entire guitar method. And now, the lesson. All right, before we begin, real quick recap on what we did in part 1. That was that B flat major, C minor, kind of going back and forth. Sounded like this. Keep in mind all those small little shapes and everything we talked about. And now let's continue with this next section. So this next section is going to start right here on that B flat that we ended on. That's that pinky note. And we're simply going to come down a normal, straight up B flat major arpeggio, just like this. 1, 5, 3, 1. Just like that, really simple. But on the way back up, it's a little tricky, a little different, not complex, just a little shift in the fingering for a particular reason. So the notes that we're playing on the way back up, on the way down again, 1, 5, 3, 1. On the way back up, 3, 5, 1, 3. So we actually end on this note right here. That's that high string D, kind of creating this little D shape right there, this little D chord, 5, 1, 3. Well, look at the fingering that happens when you do that. That's at least the way I'm playing it is ring, pinky, ring. That is just really awkward. This like ring, pinky shenanigans can be very difficult to play. So instead of doing that, now of course I could just shift what fingers I want to use and try to modify to make it work. But instead of doing that, I'm simply moving where I'm playing this B flat on the way back up. So on the way down, I'm definitely playing it right here. But on the way back up, I'm playing it here, right? That's the same B flat right here, B flat right here. Same note, just on a different string. And that allows me to not only kind of stay in this position a little bit more comfortable, but allows me to grab that final third up here a little bit easier. Instead of having to do this, I can do this, right? A nice little pointer pinky stretch, which isn't that difficult to do. And I can do a little hammer on if I want to as well, which I think I am. So the actual fingering that I'm playing is this. 1, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5 with the pinky, reach for the 1 on the high string, skipping the B string. 1, hammer on to the 3 right there with the pinky. One more time. So you notice it's a little strange because I am playing pretty much the same thing, but the fingering does shift again to make it easier to grab this top note, which kind of gives us 2 little mini shapes if we want to think about it like that. We've got this one with the pinky here on the root, but then we also have this one which has its own benefits as well. Get a little string skip out of it. Might be a little tricky to play. It's not too bad if you're using pick and fingers because you can kind of do pick, middle finger, hammer on, ring finger, hammer on with your right hand. And also just, I don't know, it feels kind of nice because you're kind of sacrificing the ease of flowing through one string at a time for kind of keeping you in the same position. Again, if I wanted to do that like this, that's just really awkward doing this. I would maybe have to jump up with my pointer finger, slide up, or do something like that. Or I can forget about all of that and just simply make the string jump to the root right here, and the shape is much easier. Again, you have to work out the picking if jumping strings is difficult, but again, much easier in my opinion. That shape one more time. And not to mention, it sets us up much better for the next figure, which is this. So this is, again, C minor, and this is a literal just down C minor, exactly the same thing. Remember what the B flat major was? 1, 5, 3, 1. Guess what the C minor is? 1, 5, 3, 1. Exactly the same thing. Looks very different, though, because of the position that we are in, and, of course, it's minor, so the third is flat, but it's the same idea. I'll play those back to back. Pointer finger, roll to get all 3 of these notes. Grab the root on the bottom, right, and we walk back up. Or actually, we don't walk back up. We just jump up to hit this top root, which I'll go over here in a second. So with this shape, what are the small chord shapes? We've got, obviously, this one that we're walking down. That's an entirely full chord. We don't need any other note. That's 1, 5, flat 3. That's a full C minor chord. And then we also get this one, right, 1, flat 3, 5, that we were playing earlier from the previous section. Again, even though this looks like one chord, and you can definitely think about it like that. You can think about it as a 4-string chord, perfectly fine. Always try to break up into these smaller pieces that you can use in a more kind of subtle way. So I'll play all that one more time. Hammer on, pointer finger reaches here, down the chord. And then instead of walking straight back up, I'm actually jumping right up to the C. So I do have to make a pretty big jump right there, like that. Now, technically what I'm doing is I'm coming down downstroke. Upstroke is hitting all of these notes, right? Notice that one upstroke. So it's that upstroke is on the B string, G string, and D string, but not the high E string. I start with a downstroke. That's just me personally. Of course, you can mess around. But that upstroke allows me to pick that last string and then jump up, grab downstroke on that high root right there. One more time. Now, after I hit this, I do a little melody, sounds like this. And that takes me here. That's really simple. That's just like C minors 1, flat 3, 2, 1 again. And then the 2, which is actually the root of the next chord. Guess what shape it is? The exact same shape, just on D minor in this case. So this is our first new chord. So far, this entire thing has just been B flat major, C minor, but now we're throwing in a D minor because it sounds cool. And that sounds like this. So coming down C minor, jump up to the C, little melody. Down D minor. Now notice my fingering. Don't have to do this fingering. It might look a little weird because I played the C minor like this, one finger, roll. But when I play the D minor, because I'm getting there, I'm actually doing this. So ring, middle, pointer, ring. You do not have to do that. If you want to do something like this, that's fine. That was just super awkward for me. Coming from a single note melody on the high E string with the last note being the pointer finger, because I got to go pointer finger and then move up 2 frets and cover all 3 strings. That's just really awkward. So because that was awkward, I opted for this fingering, which is a little awkward in of itself, but again, getting into it a little bit easier. I'll play all of that. Just like that. Now this moment after this little shape, we jump here and begin another melody. So I'll play all of that one more time. You can see how it is. B flat major, down C minor, jump up high octave, high root, little melody, down D minor, the exact same shape, just up a whole step, jump here and play a little melody that sounds like this. Right? Very simple melody, about as vanilla as it gets. But notice my fingering is a little strange because I'm setting up another chord shape. Watch this melody. So essentially I'm playing like C, B flat, A, C, B flat. I could easily do it right here or whatever, the 1,000 ways you can do it, but I'm purposefully choosing to do it in this kind of strange way like that because that allows me to play the next chord, which is this, another new kind of chord shape right here. I'll play all of that and then we'll talk about this chord shape. Here we go. And what is this chord shape? I'm coming down, this actual chord is G minor, right? You can think about the root here on the pinky, and this shape would be 3, 1, 5, 3. And I'm playing it, I think, with this fingering like I would the chord. And again, this is a 4-string chord. You can absolutely look at it as 4 strings and call it a day. But inside of this, there are 2 smaller shapes that you should always be thinking about. The top shape is just that. That's flat 3, 1, 5. Notice the shape. Probably looks familiar because it's the exact same shape as a vanilla open D minor, right? We're just playing it right here on G minor. And then this shape right here is just when you take that third, pop it down to the D string. Again, that's another G minor chord. This one from thin string to thick string is 1, 5, and then flat 3. This shape right here is the minor version of this one that we talked about in part 1 that was used in like Michael Jackson, all that stuff. This is the minor version of that. So if I were to play a G major right here, that's the major. Take this note, move it back a fret. That is now the minor shape. And that's connected to this other shape up top. That's the shape that we're coming down, right? I think the fingering I'm using is pointer, pinky, middle, ring, just exactly like the chord. Pretty sure that's what I'm doing. Let's play all of that. First one, B flat. I'll do a little slower. C minor. Melody, D minor. Melody, G minor. So you can see why I did that fingering shift, because I knew I wanted to get here so I could calm down this chord like that. So keep that in mind. Then we have a little melody. Just walking down the scale, essentially A, G, F, E flat, and then D. And that D is the beginning of part 1, which creates the first kind of loop of this entire thing, right? So this part does loop a couple times and then shifts over into the kind of B section of this power up. So that's pretty much it. Let me play that little melody one more time, that final little part. Here's that G minor. Melody, again, kind of tricky because you're playing a D string note and you have to jump up to the high E string. So I highly recommend to use the picking situation of kind of some sort of economy picking all the way down so you have an upstroke as the last note allows you to very easily reach up, grab downstroke for that high string. Again, oftentimes, I definitely did it in the playthroughs for this. I would jump up and accidentally play the B string at the same time, so you have to make sure that jump is accurate. There it is. Again, A, however you want to come down, pretty simple. A, G, F, E flat. And then D, when you do play this D, however, I would make sure that you end on the middle finger, right? So if you do ring finger, for example, right there, you might not be ready to restart part one, even though I guess that wasn't too bad right there. I would force yourself to start on middle finger if you are using this fingering, right? Because that just preps you for part one that we talked about earlier. So on and so forth. So let me recap all of that, and then we'll run a backing track of just this section. And then I'm going to go over one extra little thing when we go over the backing track that combines these two, because there's one tiny little ending difference that you have to know. So let me go over this whole part first, and then we'll do that track. Whole part sounds like this, nice and slow. Also, I'll walk you through it one more time. So B flat major, our strange little fingering, down C minor, little melody, down D minor, little melody, down G minor, little melody, taking us back to the beginning of part one. So with all that in mind, practice all this stuff, work out the fingerings, because the fingerings are a little strange, or if you have better fingerings that fit your technique, figure those out. Come back to the part of the video, and we'll get on with this backing track. All right, so that backing track was, of course, for the part that we just talked about, but now we're going to do a backing track that combines part one and part two as they're just a normal loop. They'll just go back to back like usual, but at the end of the second repetition, it is slightly different, a little tiny little shift that gets our ears and gets the harmony into the next big section that we'll talk about in later videos. So I wanted to go over that tiny little change, a very easy little change, but you have to know that it's coming. So let's just go through the whole thing. Part one first. Part two. Right back to part one. Part two. Now, right here is where things change. So at the end of the first repetition, we play this little G minor chord that we just went over, and then we do this melody. Really 4 notes, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, and then this final note is actually the beginning of part 1, and that kind of creates the big circle that you're running. But at the end of the second repetition, you don't go back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. Instead, you do this. Down G minor. Instead of doing the melody, you do this simple figure. Down G minor, hit this F right here, B string, and walk chromatic up to this A. Okay, so F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. This A, not that A, because you need to be set up for the next part. Even though I guess this A would work pretty well. I'm doing it right here, so that's what I'm going to teach. So again, chromatic, walking up, 4 notes worth, bam, and then you end right there. So that is what this track is going to be. Keep that in mind. Pay attention to which repetition you're on, because if you're on that second repetition after this G minor, do not start this melody because that will not be correct. At the second repetition, G minor, chromatic, and you end right there. So I'm going to play the whole thing right here so you can kind of see how it all flows. There's the repetition. Watch this ending. Right, see that G minor? Right into the chromatics. You have to make sure that you're paying attention to which repetition you're on, because at that second repetition, little chromatic figure like that, again, really simple. You just have to know that it's coming. G minor, shoot for this pointer finger right here, B string, I'm on the F, so the 6th fret, walk up 4 notes, chromatic, reach for this A, and then that will be the end of it. And then you will restart the entire thing. That is what this track is going to do. Again, we're doing that because we are preparing the fingers, preparing your ears, and just preparing the part to travel into the next section, the B section, which is very different and is much more difficult, at least in my opinion. So hopefully all that stuff makes sense. Recap whatever you need to recap, come back to this part of the video, and let's get on to this backing track that combines part 1 into part 2. All right, that does it for part 2 of this small arpeggio power-up. As usual, if you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below for my entire guitar method. See you all in part 3.